All right, thank you very much for staying with us here on the show. A lot more to come, like I told you. We're about to have a very important conversation, and this borders on our health. So today on our health segment, we're taking a look at that condition, that disease that bugs many people. I've had my own experiences, and you don't want to know how terrible it is. I'm talking about typhoid fever. Now, for basic knowledge for those of us who may not have the medical eye or all of that, it's caused mainly by, not so good toilet behavior and hygiene. And all of this goes to affect the human body in various ways. There are those who get all sorts of symptoms, and there are those who also get all sorts of effects on all of this. So we need to start getting ourselves very aware of what can be causing typhoid fever within the population, and how we should get ourselves very well guarded and prevent typhoid fever, because obviously it's one that affects the population in a very, very negative way. Well, today on the show, Rejoice Asabagna is a nutritionist, and she will be telling us about the element of nutrition and what we should be watching out for when we're buying the foods that we normally consume, those that we buy from the grocery stores, those from the markets, and all of that. And also, Desmond is a medical doctor with the Kolebu Teaching Hospital. Ni Akui Desmond. I love the combination. Guys, good to see you, and thank you so much for joining us here on the show.
Thank you too for having us. Good to see you too, Nathaniel.
Okay, so let's begin with the basic question about how terrible typhoid fever is. There are those who think it's not much of a big deal, like one of those everyday diseases that we will normally contract based on, All
right. So basically, we'll start. What is typhoid? So typhoid is a bacterial infection, and it's one of the diarrheal diseases. We have so many bacteria that may cause diarrheal diseases, and typhoid is one of them. It's caused by a bacteria called Salmonella species. Now, out of the Salmonella species, we have two broad categories. Okay, we have the typhoidal salmonella and the non-typhoidal salmonella. So with the typhoidal salmonella, we have the paratyphi and typhi species. So that is the class of bacteria or salmonella species that causes typhoid infection. So now, typhoid is mainly fecal-oral, it's a fecal-oral transmission disease. So anytime you hear somebody has typhoid, it means that he has ingested or taken somebody's feces directly or indirectly. So it's a very important disease, and the burden of it is so much now. It's increasing, and most of the time we have it's usually seen in situations of unhygiene, and then unsafe water, unsafe food and water. So if you are in a place or in countries where water, sanitation, and hygiene is defective, you are likely to have high incidences and prevalences of this condition. So basically, that is the basics of typhoid. And the devastation it causes so much that it affects all the organs in the body. So mainly it starts fecal-oral, it enters through your gut, enters your bloodstream, can come across all the organs, from the liver to the gallbladder to the brain to the lungs. So that's how serious it can be if left untreated.
Doc, that's some very good information, because, I've had typhoid before, and what you know is that you'd get some fever, you'd have headaches and all of that. But now we're learning something new here. So it can affect any part of the body.
Yes,
it can, cause havoc in any part of the body.
Very good.
That's
so usually when you get exposure to the pathogen, that's the bacteria, it enters the gut. The first phase is usually the immune phase. So the body responds to the bug, which you respond by generating temperature. So the body becomes feverish. You become feverish. So the fever classically in typhoid is usually a stepwise fever. So you see that the temperature of your body keeps increasing, and plateaus increase. So it's like a step, you're climbing a staircase. So it's increasing in a stepwise fashion. So that is one of the first symptoms. Then you have abdominal pain. So usually people who get typhoid will complain of abdominal pain. Then diarrhea, constipation. Then when you have it spreading to the blood and other organs, then you can have other symptoms like typhoid psychosis when it gets to the, so you see people, so that's what we call high fever.
Oh.
So that high fever.
Interesting.
So we have types of psychosis. We have the organic and non-organic. The organic, one of the main pathogens that causes organic psychosis is typhoid. So when it spreads to the brain, you can have change in behavior, change in speech, altered sensorium, confusion, all that. So that is also one of the symptoms. Then it can cause a pneumonia, so where you have cough, chest infection, symptoms and all that. Then the gallbladder, the liver and all that. And one interesting thing about it is that you may treat. So we have what we call relapse. So you treat and then it comes back again. So this is a very, it puts the notion out there that it's a condition that we must take seriously and then treat well and manage so that we prevent spread of it and curtail it.
Well, if you just joined us, we're having a conversation about typhoid fever, and here with me are Dr. Ni Akwe Alote, and also a registered nutritionist, and they'll be telling us about what else we do not know about typhoid fever. Now, one of the interesting things we're picking up this morning is that it can affect all parts of the body, especially what we normally would refer to as, high fever, where people behave abnormally. Well, Richard, I want you to tell me about the food we consume and how much risk there is for everybody. Because, this regular thing that when you go, into some of the market centers and everything, they tell you that, lettuce, for instance, grows better when you water it with water from the gutter and all of that. There are people who practice those things.
Yeah. And we just heard that it's mostly from unhygienic places, especially from, fecal contamination. So if you buy your, especially vegetables, and then you do not handle them properly when it comes to the hygienic part, like washing them very well, maybe with vinegar or with salt water, or you are not even cooking it very well, you may end up getting, this infection. And not just vegetables, but even our meat. Mostly the salmonella, you can find them in meat, especially poultry. So meat that is not cooked well, you can also, get that infection.
Right, so then it means that we need to improve our cooking methods,
yes,
and also check
methods.
where we buy our vegetables
yes,
from, right?
Yes.
Wow, that becomes very, very interesting. Well, so you need to start checking where you buy your vegetables from, all the groceries, especially the fresh fruits and vegetables. Because, interestingly, vegetables are supposed to make us healthier. Fruits and vegetables are supposed to make us healthier. Doc, what are the statistics looking like? Because, sometimes when we're having these conversations, the people detach themselves because they may think, it's an everyday occurrence, so what's the big deal?
Okay,
what are the numbers looking like?
Great. So as I mentioned, the morbidity is so great. So at the global level, we are seeing about more than 9 million cases of typhoid every year.
9 million cases of typhoid every day?
Every year. So that's
year.
What WHO is reporting. Then out of it, about 11,000 deaths every year. Wow. So that's quite a massive one. So
how affected is the African and West African region by
these
numbers?
It's even worse because African populations, South American populations have the most unhygienic practices in terms of water, sewage, water pollution, food. So as you say, where I live in Kolibu, you have farmers watering the plants with sewage water.
Wow.
Nobody knows, even if the water has been treated and has some of these pathogens. That aside, you may have other diarrheal diseases like cholera, which we have an outbreak now. So it's very endemic. We are in an endemic zone in Ghana and Africa. So it's a very important topic we have to really put on our minds.
All right, Rejoice. We've talked about treating the food, that we eat and the way we prepare it. Now, it's difficult for anybody to figure out where these, foods have come from or where they've been grown from, or the methods that are used to grow them. So then, what do we do in that regard? You've spoken about, the use of vinegar when you're using vegetables. Is there any other thing we need to know regarding?
So it's not just vegetables, but any food at all. you're going to, even food that you cook yourself at home, you know, heat will kill this organism that we are talking about. So just make sure that you're cooking your food very well to the, you know, temperatures required before you consume them. Because if you are not able to cook these foods well, especially meat products, if you are not cooking these foods well and then you consume them, you end up getting the infection. So the best practice is just make sure that you are cooking your food very well. And even how you handle your food, you use the washroom and maybe you were cooking something and then you enter the washroom, you come back and you forget to wash your hands or wash your hands properly under running water. You end up transferring the bacteria from the washroom onto the food, especially with children. So I think children too should pay close attention to children because, you know, how they wash their hands, the hygiene aspect is not that good, especially when it comes to children. So I think it's key that hygiene is just key. You just need to, you know, practice proper hygiene in the kitchen and anywhere at all you find yourself.
How responsive are patients and, you know, some of the people who come and consult you for nutrition advice? How responsive are people to these conversations about you know, hygiene, being extra careful with how you prepare your food and all of that?
You know, when they are not aware, but when you tell them all these things, I think because they are suffering, they want to get better. So I think they practice it. They respond properly to it, especially when they become aware of the causes and how to, you know, get rid of it. So I think it's quite impressive when they get to know, but mostly people do not even know that typhoid has to do with proper hygiene. A lot of people actually think it's coming from the dust you inhale. So maybe when you live in a dusty area, someone will say, I don't even live in a dusty area. I'm living in an air-conditioned house, so I'm not, you know, exposed. A lot of people do not even know that it has to do with, you know, salmonella. Even people in the health sector, a lot of people do not know that it has to do with the organism salmonella. So when they get to hear they are shocked. You know, they are shocked, and when you tell them, when you educate them about these things, when they come to the hospitals and then we have these health talks and all of that, the response is quite impressive because they want to get better, and then with their treatment, it goes away.
Well, if you're just joining us, we're still here on Prime Morning. My name is Nathaniel Atto, and we're having a conversation in this health segment about the typhoid fever. Have you had typhoid fever before? Well, if you haven't, then make sure you never get it because what we're learning this morning becomes very, very alarming. And we're also learning that there's a very high prevalence rate as well within the population because of general practices when it comes to hygiene. And helping us with this conversation and more education this morning, Rejoice Asabagna. She is a certified nutritionist and also Dr. Desmond Ni Akwe Alote, who is a medical doctor at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital here in Accra. Doc,
yes, sir.
More of the statistics, okay? Now, when we look at adults and children, we've mentioned children because children become you know, more vulnerable in these kinds of situations because if you have a certain age range and a certain demographic of school-going children, they're still getting used to hygienic practices and all of that. How prevalent is this amongst the children, you know, and how much is it affecting them as well in terms of what effect the symptoms are giving the children? Okay,
so the risk groups, so more children because they are now growing, their immunity is still not strong enough. And immunocompromised people who have conditions that puts their immunity, so your immunity is how your body fights infection. So it's like the soldiers in your body, that when there's an attack, they are ready to fight back. So if you have certain conditions like HIV, diabetes, you are at a risk of getting a low immunity. And that way, you are at a high risk of getting a more severe infection when you have typhoid exposure. So children, you have a greater incidence of typhoid in children than people who are immunocompromised, then the aged population, people who are above 65, also have more serious infections and more morbidity when it comes to getting typhoid. Now, you will realize that over the past years, the more hygiene improves, the less we get severe forms of the infection and exposure to the disease. So back in the days, my professors, and they saw more of the complicated forms of typhoid because there was less, exposure to hygiene practices and then less exposure to knowledge and antibiotics that we can use to fight. So something like when you go to the departments of surgery, those years, they were doing a lot of typhoid surgery. Like typhoid can go as much as to cause perforation in your intestine. So you have a lot of these cases and a lot of mortalities from it. Because if you have a perforation, it means there's a hole in the intestine. Every content in your bowel leaks out. Now you have a general systemic condition, inflammation. The whole system just shuts down because of the ongoing inflammation and ongoing leakage in the stomach. So that's, or in the intestine. So that alone is a very severe form. So they were seeing more of those ones. But you see, as time went by, it showed us that the more we improve the hygiene practice, the more we treat it well, the more we prevent the disease by preventing exposure, making sure that we wash our hands, hygiene practices. And it's even evident that with COVID, we had lesser and lesser incidences of some of these diarrheal diseases because when COVID came, everybody was washing their hand. Everybody was practicing some form of hygiene, using the hand sanitizer, one way or the other. And that has improved, that has helped with prevention of all of these diarrheal diseases that are associated with hygiene. So it goes on to say that hygiene is very important in all these risk groups and categories. Children, immunocompromised, compromised, and everyone, just to prevent the condition, because prevention is the best form of management. If you don't prevent the condition, it's more expensive to treat it and to reduce the incidence of the condition. So I think I'll add that to the point made that we have to be conscious about hygiene practices, our food and water safety as well. Now, there's a vaccine for typhoid, but...
I was coming to that,
okay,
yes.
There's a vaccine for typhoid, but the vaccine is not the only way to reduce the burden of the disease. Because if you get vaccinated and you are still spreading the disease or there's still active infection, we are nowhere near reducing the morbidity and mortality of the disease. And these vaccines are not lifelong. You require boosters. And if you have vaccines that you always require boosters, how many people can be able to keep up the trend of getting boosters? So the main thing is food and water safety and hygiene. And then in addition, when usually those who are not in endemic places, we are in an endemic, so you are likely to get exposure to the disease. But there are people who are immigrants, they are in zones or countries that are not endemic. We recommend that they get a vaccine when they are traveling to areas that are endemic so that they don't get exposure. So the vaccine is important, but the major way of controlling it is what? Your food and water hygiene and safety practices. Yes.
Doc, many people have been wondering whether it's okay to do, have these vaccines before, or, to prevent this, or to guard yourself against contracting it as against, the opposite. What is the ideal situation?
So good. So the main objective of vaccines is to introduce weaker forms of the pathogen. So there are ways of getting exposure to an infection. One is through a real infection with an active form of the disease. And the second is through a passive way of getting an immunity from a changed version, which is the vaccination. So in our part of the country, if you are not exposed, then we recommend that you get a vaccine. Okay. But most of us have gotten exposure one way or the other. Because we have people in our secondary schools cooking for us, people in restaurants who have typhoid, and they've not actually been screened for it, and they are cooking. If you go and use your washroom, come back to cook, some people don't wash their hands well, they end up transmitting it. There's a story of this cook in the 18th centuries there called, we call it Typhoid Mary. We called her Typhoid. She was Mary Malone. So one of the story was that she was a cook and she had typhoid for a long time. So one thing about typhoid is we have people who are chronic carriers. So you treat them, the bag goes to hide in parts of the intestine or the gallbladder. And when they are there, it's very difficult to treat. So they harbor or hold it for extended periods of time, for more than a year or more, years. So those people are what we call chronic carriers. So what the chronic carriers, what they have is that they have the infection that they can transmit. They can transmit an active infection, but they themselves don't show any symptoms. So we call them asymptomatic carriers. So they are carrying the pathogen, but they don't show symptoms, but they can transmit it to you, and you may show symptoms when you get it. So we recommend that anybody involved in cooking for people, even involved in cooking, food, like working on food industry-wise and all those things, we screen such people for this disease so that we reduce the spread of it. Because when we don't do that, we end up improving, fostering spread of the condition. Because if somebody is carrying it, goes to use a washroom or uses unhygienic means of working, they can spread it. Okay, so the chronic carriers is an important part of the disease transmission of typhoid, and we have to be very much aware of that. So though you can have vaccination and all that these other, if you don't have food safety regulations, where people have to present some screenings or some form of medical clearance showing that they don't have some of these conditions before they engage in commercial food activities, then we will not win with the fight against the disease.
Well, so you can also share your thoughts with us. Look at the bottom of the screen. We've got a phone number there on WhatsApp and also on Facebook and on X. Send in your questions. I know you have a lot of questions that are bugging you. I'll come to the education element or the public health element of all of this, where there's a lot of communication around typhoid and what we can do to prevent it. But before that, Doc, we all use our devices, our phones. People go into the washroom with their phones, their hands are on it, they finish using the washroom, they get back on the phone, wash their hands a certain way, and then bring them. Do these bacteria, function outside of, are they able to function depending on temperatures or anything outside the body and become a platform for spreading?
Yes, so as I said, it's fecal-oral, but transmission can be direct or indirect. So the direct one, say you've gone to the washroom, you don't wash your hands well, because if you use your washroom or whatever, you may have had exposure to fecal matter. So you can't see some of these, they are microscopic. So you have them on your hands, you go and prepare food or you touch something, release those bags onto whatever you've touched. Or even go and shake somebody's hands. The person also uses that same hand. I remember there was an advert on TV on cholera, and you see that the moment the woman went to use the washroom, didn't wash the hand, there's a purple. So that demonstrated. So anything you've touched has the bag. You touch another thing, so we call them fomites. Somebody else touches it. He also carries the bag, does not wash the hand, and ingests it. So that is one indirect way of getting it. So phones, doorknobs, and all those, fomites, we call them fomites, indirect ways of transmitting it. So we have to be very cautious about these things. Me, for instance, after work, I usually sanitize my phone because I may have touched something or come into contact with a bag that I don't know. So these are some of the things you are conscious of yourself and others. So you wash your hands well. Everyone is washing their hands well with clean water, running water with soap. You end up reducing the burden of transmitting it to one object or the other for another person to also come and touch and also transmit it to himself and others. So it's one key way of indirectly transmitting the condition, other than directly through food.
All right, so Rejoice, let's talk about education. Information becomes very key here. You've been talking about, those who come to you and those who listen, especially when some of them start contracting it. What would you advise regarding how we put information out there on typhoid? Because I'm realizing this morning that we have underrated the true effect as a populace, and on a smaller scale, I'm realizing we all underrate the true effect of typhoid.
Some people actually think they have the perception that typhoid is like hypertension. It doesn't go away. So you hear someone say, I have typhoid for like 2 months, 3 months. They keep saying, I have typhoid, as if to say it's something that stays with you even after treating, it doesn't go away. So you need to let them understand that typhoid is just like having malaria. Once you treat it, it goes away. And if you're not exposed to it again, it doesn't come back until you have the exposure again. So information is very key, and mostly we educate people who come to the hospitals. Even we go into the communities, sometimes the marketplaces, we go there, we talk to them. And one thing I would recommend is that people should, just like we screen for hepatitis B when we are having health screening, we screen for HIV, we screen for other, diseases and infections. Typhoid should be one of the things that we should include in health screening, the routine health screening. When we go out there into the communities to screen, mostly we do not screen for typhoid. The focus is usually on hepatitis B, on malaria, on HIV, and full blood counts and all of that. But we do less of the typhoid. But typhoid is something that can actually spread easily. One person can actually just spread it to thousands of people. So I think typhoid should be included in the routine health screening when we go out into the communities to have this health screening and all of that. And information should, go out there anywhere in the churches, in the markets, at the taxi ranks, anywhere at the lorry stations, wherever, they need to get it. Information has to be.
And Doc mentioned something about the COVID period, which brought all of us, to start, the practice of regular hand washing and everything. But I'm looking within spaces, and I'm doing personal observation here. I'm realizing that the thing about hand washing and having the Veronica buckets and all of that is just gone down. You go to public places, you go to offices and all of that, and it looks like because COVID is more or less out of the system and has gone beyond the danger range, everybody seems to have taken a backseat again. That's worrying, isn't it?
Yes. Some places you even get the Veronica bucket, you get the soap, all right. You don't have tissue after washing. There's nothing to even wipe your hands. And this person is tempted to rub their hands on their clothes. You can have the bacteria stuck in there. So you've done the washing, all right, but then there's
back to square one.
Yes, back to square one. So I think because COVID has gone down, people are also relaxing on the hand washing aspect. And if only we can bring back the hand washing thing and the sanitizing, we preach more of it, I think we will see a reduction in cases in our various facilities.
We're still having this conversation on typhoid fever. I'm sure you've picked up a few tips here and there on how to make sure that you stay safe and you're away from the very, very bad condition called typhoid fever. Now, here with me in the studio are Dr. Desmond Niakwe Alote, who is a medical doctor at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital, and also Rejoice Asabagna, who is a certified nutritionist, talking about various elements of prevention, some of our practices, and how we should make sure that we do not get typhoid. It's interesting that you mention, the bit about, the psycho element where, these symptoms you manifest from your brain and people start misbehaving. For a very long time, what I thought was that you get those conditions when your temperature is extra high. I hardly ever thought that it could come from typhoid.
Yeah, so basically, as I said, exposure to the bacteria through feces into the mouth, you swallow, it gets into the intestines. Now, it attaches, so the bacteria is rod-like, has something called flagella. They have these extensions on their cells. And then they get into the intestine, gets attached, enters the bloodstream. So in the bloodstream, it means that it can go anywhere in the body, because once it's in the blood, it can spread to any organ. So untreated severe infections can spread. And one of the organs it can spread to is the brain. So when it spreads to the brain, you have confusion, you have altered behavior, altered consciousness, altered sensorium. Just like the way other infective pathogens can spread to the brain, like even malaria, you can have cerebral malaria. So a high fever, so one of the things that every doctor, so you present with fever, doctor, I feel cold and my body temperature is high. One of the things we screen for is typhoid, malaria. So these infective pathogens, because we are in an endemic zone for these things. So you screen for these things just to raise your level or index of suspicion for it. So the high fever is not what is causing the altered behavior, but the organism, the pathogen. Okay, so the organism spreads, enters the brain, causes inflammation of the nerves in the brain, the brain cells and nerves in the brain, and that is what will give you those behaviors or those clinical symptoms. So, in as much as it's at the back of your mind, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't look out for other psychiatric disorders. So there could be a baseline psychiatric disorder with this just superimposing on it. You understand? So most of the time we screen for all these things to be sure that it's not just an acute psychotic episode, but maybe there's a chronic thing going on, schizophrenia and all those other psychotic conditions that can exhibit similar conditions. So your doctor is in the best position to be able to differentiate what exactly it is. This high, so we call it high fever because it has been common, like it's one of the common causes of organic psychosis. So somebody has high fever. It may be that it is a typhoid, infection in the brain that is causing those symptoms, or there's a baseline psychiatric condition that is exhibiting. So that layman's term high fever, we have to differentiate and know how, and their management will be different. Because if it's an acute psychosis from typhoid, then you have to treat the pathogen. If you don't treat the pathogen, it wouldn't go away. And you have severe morbidity. So one thing is, so the brain, the heart, the lungs, it can affect the heart and cause myocarditis. The muscles of the heart becomes inflamed and cause all these conditions, like embolization, where there's clots dislodging and it can affect your breathing and all that. So it can be very, very severe. Now, when you have systemic infection, we call it septicemia or sepsis, it can shut down even your kidneys. So these are very severe forms where, if left like untreated and unmanaged properly, you can have some of these things. Now, somebody comes to you at the clinic with some symptoms suggestive. You would want to make a diagnosis. So one is our clinical suspicion. Two is we do some lab tests. So most of the time, the lab tests that a lot of people get to do, which we call the VIDAL, that is the commonest one, the serological test. Actually, that is the least sensitive and specific. It means that it doesn't tell you the true cases. You understand? So most of the tests we do in the hospitals may not even actually tell you the true picture of what's happening. The recommended test is blood culture, which is more expensive. So we don't even do that more often. So a lot of people may be diagnosed with a condition, but probably they are not having active infection, which warrants treatment. Do you understand? So a lot of people they say you have typhoid. So that is one of the myths. You have to be sure of what it is by doing your cultures, blood culture, stool culture, blood giving you a higher yield because the stool will take some time, after 2 weeks before you get it. But most of it, we don't end up doing blood cultures. We just do the serology, which is the least sensitive and least specific. Wow. So that myth is always the, what type, but we've not confirmed it. Wow. So be sure of, let your doctor explain to you what it is. Because if you tell me it's just by serology, it is not the true picture. Maybe he will empirically treat you for it, but it's not the truth. That is why we don't encourage you to go to the pharmacy and tell them you have typhoid, then they'll give you antibiotics. Now, what you are doing is that you may end up causing resistance to the pathogen. Because when you have a real active infection that warrants treatment and is causing more severe infection, and you have resistance. Resistance means that the bugs, they've developed some ways of surviving, even though the antibiotics are being given. So they can survive. They are resisting the effects of the drug. So they become resistant. Then it means that you have severe form of the infection. You can't treat it well. So we advise that desist from self-treating yourself. That you have typhoid, you've gone to this clinic, they say you have typhoid, so you've been taking, some people have been swallowing antibiotics here and there for typhoid. It's a very bad practice because at the end you increase the resistance of these ones. So some settings are there, certain group of antibiotics that we know that these antibiotics can fight the condition. Now they become resistant. So we have to upscale. We upscale still there is resistance. What do? It means you are stuck. So that's what happens when we don't have rational use of antibiotics. So the fact that you have serological tests done, which is picking up, because serology means that you have antibodies. Antibodies are what your body produces when it sees the virus, it sees the bacteria or the pathogen. If I say pathogens, virus, bacteria, fungi, they are all pathogens. So once the body sees them, they produce antibodies where these antibodies are their body's mechanism of fighting the infection. So if you go and test the antibodies, maybe you have a previous exposure to the infection, which your body still has the antibodies to. It doesn't mean that you need to treat. So we have to be careful. And it's only about 1 to 5% of the population that become chronic carriers, what I described earlier, where they don't have symptoms. But they are the ones that are transmitting it because they have the infection hidden in their gallbladders and PS patches and all that, the immunologic parts of the intestine. So the body has immune systems in all over. So we call them the lymphoid tissues. So if you have these hiding there in the gallbladder, you end up carrying it for a long time.
And that becomes more dangerous.
Yes, because you end up spreading it, but you may not have infection, the symptoms. So for you, yours is to be conscious about it and then do things that will not spread the infection.
Very well. Now, talk about doing things that will not spread the infection. I'm looking at nutrition and what we eat and what you, the nutritionists, normally encourage all of us to eat as part of our diet. Is there a way we can, boost the immune system such that, it reduces, your risk in a way?
Of course, if your immune system is what fights infections and other diseases. So if it is compromised, you are more exposed to, these diseases. So there are a lot of foods you can eat, especially vegetables. We always preach, in a typical Ghanaian home, we are all about the carbs, we eat the proteins, all right, and then maybe some small vegetables. How many people eat vegetables and then fruits on a daily basis? Say you have finished a meal and then you are taking a fruit. It's just a handful of Ghanaians who do that. So the best is to eat a balanced diet. And when I say a balanced diet, it means that it's coming from all the food groups. If you have a plate of rice, you should have your stew, you should have your salad. Even if you're not doing salad, you should have your contomere stew, you should have your meat, and then you should have your fruit always on standby. And it's advisable to eat whole food.
And I remember, on the lighter side, I remember when His Excellency the President delivered one of his COVID addresses and said contumely has, boost the immune system. It got finished in some of the markets.
I know.
Yeah.
So,
the other bit about preparation of the food. Now, you talked about temperatures and the temperatures at which we cook these foods and how it kills some of the bacteria. That's what you would advise, that we... And can you be specific with the kinds of temperatures we're looking at?
With meats, it should go at least beyond, is it 65? At least 65 degrees Celsius. Below that, with meat, it wouldn't be able to kill the pathogen if there is any.
What about the other forms of cooking, like grilling, like roast and all of that?
So even with that, with the grilling, they have different ways of doing the grills. So if you are doing the whole meat, you should know how to open it up for it to enter into all the various places that the heat needs to get to. Okay, there are people who eat, say, medium cooked food or,
So for those who like the steaks, I mean, there are some restaurants in town.
Yes.
I mean, outside of Ghana as well, you go there and you want to have a good steak and they give you the option of semi-well done. There's still a bit of blood in there.
Exactly. And those people, if the meat has the pathogen, then you're at risk of contracting it. So it is not safe to eat food that is not well cooked, especially with meat. Okay, because we just learned that it's from the salmonella, and salmonella can be found in food. So with the temperatures, it's very, very important that you cook the food very well, especially meat products.
What about spices? Do they play any role in there?
Yes, spices, natural. Yes,
yeah.
Natural spices have what we call antioxidants, and what antioxidants do is protects the body from free radicals. Free radicals cause diseases in our system. Okay, so when you eat spices, have these antioxidants that helps to protect the body sort of from these free radicals, and then protecting you from getting diseases and all of that. So yes, natural spices. When I say natural spice, like pepper with someone who has typhoid, I wouldn't recommend. If you have the typhoid already, it's not advised to eat the spices, especially the hot spices, because he mentioned that it starts from the guts. Okay, so the guts, there can be inflammation, irritation and all of that, and there is diarrhea, there's stomach upsets and all of that. So if you end up eating hot spices, especially peppers, you may end up making your situation even worse.
Okay, so those of you out there who like to, put a whole bag of pepper in your soups and all of that, when you get typhoid, please just stay away from it a little bit if you can, because according to the professionals, it worsens your situation or causes some inflammations in your system. Let me just quickly do some messages here. There's this one from Patino. I like your nickname. I don't know whether it's a name or a nickname. Good morning, doctor. Can you please, can too much oil also cause typhoid fever? And after eating, do you drink warm water? Is that?
Okay, so too much oil does not cause typhoid fever. So the point about oil is, so a lot of oil, or especially the what we call the saturated fats, you are eating a lot of these saturated, may not augur well with your body, because you end up building a lot of these fatty acids in the body. You have high cholesterol and all these things. It's not healthy. So your overall health, a lot of oil may not be too good for you. Now, when you have certain conditions like malaria and all those things, like these infective causes, you don't want, in that acute state, you want to eat foods that will help you with quick recovery, like your immune system to bounce back easily. So in those phases, we encourage more fluids, eating more fluids, more foods rich in vitamins and vitamin C, drink more of your soups, light soups and things. That is not the time you need a lot of oils, do you understand? So the point is, the dietitian is telling us that balanced meals, where you have right quantities and right proportions of each of the nutrients, because the nutrients, they are all important. Nobody should tell you that fat is not good. Fat is good, but in the right quantities, because your body uses these fats in their cells, in their metabolism and all that. If you say you lack the fats, it will not function well. So in their right proportions, that is the best. Okay, so when you have an acute illness, we advise that you take in more fluids, more fruits and vegetables, so that your immunity will be stronger. Then you can bounce back. But that should be your normal lifestyle.
Sure.
Your normal lifestyle should include more of these foods that will make you stronger. That is a balanced diet.
Wow.
And then other practices such as reducing your alcohol intake, reducing smoking, resting. So those are the tricks.
Well, that's a very good health sermon on a Tuesday morning, reducing alcohol intake and smoking. So those of you who, indulge a little too much, that goes out to you. Some quick comments and then we wrap up the conversation here. This one is from Dixon. This says, good morning. Please, I have typhoid. What can I do, please? Okay, so Dixon, I don't know if you were tuned in from the start of the show. There's been a lot of information given us here. You probably would want to go back to our live stream, but I'll have Doc respond to it very briefly before we wrap up. Also, good morning, Nat. Please ask your guest if it's true that anybody who has typhoid fever may have taken in some human feces. Thanks for a great job. Okay, thank you very much for that message as well. That is true. That's what the doctor has confirmed here. Dr. Alote has confirmed here today. Nat, I am back again. In most cases, doctor will not tell you what is wrong with you, even if you ask. What can a patient do to know what is wrong with him or her? Thanks once again. This is from Ibrahim Yendi.
Yeah.
So a big difficulty. I mean, sometimes patients also get some of these, this kind of feedback from the consulting room when they're trying to get more information about what exactly is wrong with them, especially if you have a situation like a typhoid
yes,
fever.
so I can understand the commenter, but the point is your doctor should explain everything to you after every consultation. Should tell you what's happening. If he's unsure about anything, he or she's unsure about, he should explain to you what he thinks or not. So that's what I'm saying. With typhoid, most of the tests we do is the serology. So with the serology, say you pick up some antibodies in high titers, and you have symptoms. So we may empirically treat you. So he, using his clinical judgment, thinks that he should treat you for it and monitor. He may tell you that you have the pathogen, but he hasn't confirmed it yet. So that's what I'm saying. Until you do a culture, the culture, what it does is you take the sample where the organism is located, so like the blood, stool, okay? And then you put it in a medium where it can grow, to encourage it to grow. That way, when you have it growing, it means that it is present. And that will even tell you more information because it will help you to know what antibiotics will be sensitive to that organism. But most of the time, we don't end up doing the cultures because of costs. And then sometimes the acute phases, we may end up treating and then we may lose the organism in the blood. So he may be unsure to confirm that it's typhoid, but all that I can tell you from the serology is that the titers are high. I suspect that you've had an acute infection, so I'll go ahead to treat. Your doctor should be able to explain everything to you, whatever it is.
Very well. So your doctor should be able to explain everything to you. You have to insist on it. And Dr. Ni Akwe Alote is advising that you make sure that you get as much information as possible from your doctor. We'll be wrapping up the conversation in a bit, but I want you to tell me, now, there are times when, a patient goes to a doctor and after treatment and everything, they are referred to you. So in the typhoid situation, when are these patients normally referred to you for more advice on their nutrition and what they should do?
One of the symptoms of typhoid is dehydration. Dehydration from vomiting and then diarrhea, So mostly when they come to us at that stage, the very first stage, because when it gets to the last stage, it requires surgery and serious work done. At that stage, you're not going to be talking about what you should eat or what you shouldn't eat. So mostly it's from the first stage when they start showing the mild symptoms and all of that, they bring them to us. And because of the dehydration, what we always recommend, he mentioned earlier that fluids. We recommend that you take in a lot of fluids. And when I say fluids, don't go home drinking malt, drinking, the carbonated drinks because they say go and drink a lot of fluids, okay? So we advise that you take in a lot of soups and be mindful of what you use to prepare your soup. The spices, the peppers should reduce and all of that. Your oils should reduce and all of that. So when we say soups, we mean, light soups. Your light soup shouldn't be too hot. With too much pepper.
Shouldn't be too peppery.
It should.
Those of you who
we say when you are sick, they want to prepare you light soup. Everybody thinks pepper soup, that's the magic. But if you have typhoid, pepper soup doesn't do the magic for you. It actually worsens your conditions. And drink a lot of water. And then coconut water is there. You might want to make good use of coconut water as well. Just stay hydrated. We encourage you to stay hydrated as much as possible. And then your balanced diet, your fruits and your vegetables is very... But the one thing about typhoid too is, because of the stomach upset, eating high fiber food, rich foods would end up putting too much pressure on your digestive system. So we ask you to reduce, though fiber is good, we ask you to reduce the fiber-rich foods, especially the whole grains, okay? You will eat them, but you have to reduce them because you don't want to put pressure on your digestive system, making it even worse.
Thank you very much. And it's been a very engaging conversation. Thank you all so much for watching the show. And thanks once again to Dr. Desmond Ni Akwe Alote of the Korle Bu Teaching Hospital. And also Rejoice Asabagna, who is a certified nutritionist, bringing us a lot of information as regards what we should do to make sure that we stay safe and prevent typhoid fever. More to bring you tomorrow on the show here on Prime Morning, which is also on 281 on DSTV. Thanks to the whole production team. Thanks to you out there for always making us relevant. You stay well. Have a wonderful day. My name is Nathaniel Atto.